EMP Series, Revolution, Episode 21. Rico Corolla left Captain Crawford's office and headed downstairs to the platform outside the camp. Crawford followed close behind. When the two men walked out of the camp's front gate, they saw the young lieutenant there that had notified them of the capture just minutes before. He was accompanied by 3 of his soldiers. Corolla nodded and the lieutenant spoke up. Zeb Fairley, age 20. Zachary Fairley, age 17. He handed Corolla their ID papers and said, "This other one has no ID on him. He refuses to give his name or any other information." Corolla looked over the 2 boys and then walked over to Steve's side. "Is that so?" he asked as he looked Steve over. "Tell me your name," he demanded. Steve stood on his knees, cuffed and bound at the feet, looking straight ahead and saying nothing. Corolla nodded at one of the soldiers who immediately smashed the butt of his rifle into Steve's back, right between his shoulder blades. Steve fell forward face first onto the platform. The soldier grabbed him by his hair and pulled him back up onto his knees. Steve's face was covered in blood which ran down from the gash above his right eye. Once again, Corolla demanded, "Tell me your name." Then he leaned over, inches from Steve's face, and said softly, "I will not ask you again." Steve, eyes facing forward, said nothing. Corolla reached to his side and drew his Sig Sauer 9mm service revolver and pressed the muzzle against Steve's temple. He paused for a moment and then lowered the Sig, still holding it in his hand. With his other hand, he reached into his coat and pulled out a copy of the governor's order declaring any and all semi-automatic firearms illegal. He held it up in the air for the quickly gathering crowd to see. "Citizens, this is an order from the governor of this state. It serves as public notice that from this day forward it is illegal to carry or possess any semi-automatic firearm in this region." On the platform, laid out in front of each prisoner, were the weapons that they were in possession of when they were caught. Steve had a 1911 .45 caliber handgun, as well as an AR-15 rifle with military-grade infrared night vision optics on it. Zeb Fairley had a Glock 19 and a Ruger Mini 14 rifle. Zach Fairley had a Sig Sauer .357 Magnum revolver, and the only gun which was still legal under the new law, a single-shot 12-gauge shotgun. Over at the other end of the platform sat Levi Connolly. Levi was watching the whole incident take place. Levi had an old realistic brand walkie-talkie in his coat pocket. He had it positioned in such a way, with his lapel folded back, that the radio would pick up voices and sounds on the platform. The transmission distance was extremely limited, but one of Levi's associates, a fellow watcher, was located in the storage room in the back of the diner. The watchers always worked in pairs, one out on the street or the platform, and the other listening from the storage room and writing down everything he heard on the radio. Levi's theory was that, with all that was happening at any given time on the street, it would be easy for that man to miss something that was said or done. In this way, the second man, who was writing everything down, and between the two, their reports would be complete and comprehensive. Levi was an engineer by trade after all, and he had always given great attention to every detail. Now he watched, powerless to help Steve and the boys. Rico Carollo folded up the governor's order and put it back in his coat pocket. These two boys are the sons of the fugitive terrorist Carl Fairley. But then I suppose most of you already know that. He paused briefly as he paced behind his prisoners. These men were all found to be carrying illegal firearms. A voice shouted out from the crowd. Nobody had any idea that they were illegal. You just told us. How could they have known? Carollo scanned the crowd looking for the person that belonged to the voice. When he could not determine who had said it, he continued. Ignorance of the law is not a valid defense or excuse, nor does it protect you from the responsibility to follow that law. Then he walked over to Zach. The shotgun this young man had is a legal hunting gun. However, the revolver is not. As he picked up the revolver to show the crowd, Zeb addressed Carollo. That's mine. I asked my brother to carry it for me. We were riding in the mountains. I wanted him to have it for snakes and critters and such. It's my gun, he said again. Carollo looked over at him. Nice try, son. That's commendable, actually, trying to protect your younger brother. But you're lying, son. We both know that. Then he looked back at Zach. Boy, tell me where your father is at this very moment. Zach answered, I don't know, sir. I haven't seen him in a while. That's a lie, Carollo seethed. I know you're both working with him. Then he asked Zeb the same question and got the same answer. Then he approached Steve. Walking behind his three prisoners, who were all on their knees, cuffed and bound. How about you, Mr. No-Name Man? I suppose you haven't seen Carl Fairley either, have you? Steve continued to stare into the crowd in front of him, not answering Agent Carollo. So, you're riding with the sons of a known wanted terrorist. You're in violation of state gun laws in a region locked down by martial law. And, when questioned about the terrorist, you do not deny that you know where he is. I deem your actions to be seditious and treasonous. Under martial law, you are being charged as a conspirator to terrorism. I find you guilty of these charges. Unfortunately for you, there is no judge or higher court operational in this region at the time. Your sentence for these crimes is death. With that, he lifted his sidearm up and fired point blank into the side of Steve's head. Steve fell to his side, onto the platform dead, his blood pooling up around him. The crowd murmured and gasped at what Carollo had just done. Then, Agent Carollo walked behind Zeb and stopped next to Zach. Zachary Fairley, you are charged with weapons violations under martial law. Your crimes are also of a seditious and treasonous nature. Because there is no higher court or judge operating in this region at this time, I will act as adjudicator. I find you guilty of these charges. You are hereby also sentenced to death. He began to lift his sidearm up to Zach's head when Levi Connolly jumped up from his seat. He pointed the .38 special handgun that he was holding in his hand at the soldiers as he advanced upon them rapidly. On the platform were Carollo, Captain Crawford, and the three members of the Special Operations team that flew in with Carollo yesterday. As Levi advanced, he began firing on them from right to left. The first shot hit the lieutenant square between the eyes and he fell dead. Then, still advancing, he aimed slightly to his left. and fired 2 more shots in quick succession, hitting and killing one of the soldiers. From there, he aimed a few degrees more to the left and fired 2 more shots, which went between the soldiers and hit the building behind them. Still advancing, finally he aimed left again. He fired his 6th and final shot, hitting Rico Carollo in the shoulder. Having lost track of how many shots he fired in the excitement, he squeezed the trigger 2 more times. Click, click. His weapon was empty. He barely squeezed the trigger for the final time when 2 of the soldiers drew down on him with their M4 rifles and fired several shots, killing Levi Connolly. Barely 5 seconds had passed from the time Levi jumped up from his seat. The lieutenant, 1 soldier, and he himself were left dead, and Special Agent Rico Carollo was injured. Levi's partner, who was sitting in the diner storage room taking notes, realizing what had just happened, quickly stuffed the notebooks into a leather backpack along with the radio and fled out the back door and up the hill that led to the ridge and mountains behind. He knew that he must protect the record of what had just happened and find a way to get it to Carl. Rico Carollo, bleeding from the shoulder, standing on the platform with Crawford and the 2 remaining soldiers, stood stunned for a brief moment. Then, without hesitation, he lifted his sidearm and shot Zach in the head. He fell dead on the platform. Captain Crawford had trouble processing what had just happened and stood frozen on the platform beside him. Then Carollo turned and shot Zeb as well. The crowd stood stunned and frozen. Carollo looked up and out into the crowd. "We have stood by and watched as you people have aided this terrorist group in their endeavors to undermine our mission here. A mission that was sanctioned by the governor of this state, as well as the Congress of these United States. We have dealt with you all fairly and patiently as we tried to win your hearts and minds to do the right thing. The time for those tactics and strategies is now over. Every one of you who have aided Carl Fairley and his group, as well as those of you who simply look the other way and pretend not to know what he was up to, are responsible for what has happened here today. The wanton sedition and crimes against this government, which all of you share culpability for, ends here. It ends now." He took the notice of the gun law back out from his coat pocket and affixed it over a protruding nail in the signpost in front of him. "Now, none of you can say that you are not aware of this law. The penalty for sedition is death, as you have all just seen." He walked away, leaving the crowd utterly speechless in his wake. Back inside Crawford's office, a medic attended to his shoulder. Captain Crawford paced nervously as the medic worked. "You realize that by doing what you did, Carl will be coming for you, coming for us. There's no possible way he will be able to let this go unanswered." Carollo smiled slightly as he answered Captain Crawford. "I do know, Captain. As a matter of fact, I'm counting on it. Once we dispose of Carl Fairley, all that will be left is the mopping up of a few minor details, and I can get out of this crap hole and back to civilization." Crawford began to speak again, but Carollo stopped him. He waved him off and said, "That is all for now, Captain. You are dismissed." Crawford scowled at Carollo, said angrily, "Mr. Carollo, may I remind you that we are in my office?" Carollo looked at Captain Crawford sternly and said, "I don't care. Get out anyway." Crawford's head seemed as if it was about to explode. He was fuming. One of Carollo's team members stepped toward Crawford. Crawford turned and stormed out of his office. Thank you all for your support here on YouTube. I would like to take a brief moment to remind everyone that I have the untold edition of this story, as well as character backstories, available on my Patreon page. There, I also have other writing projects, including my newest story titled Outlaw Nation. Outlaw Nation is a prequel to the EMP series story. It starts set in 1970 and chronicles the journey of the character Roger as he is discharged from the military, comes home to an ungrateful nation after the Vietnam War, and meets up with and joins the Outlaw Motorcycle Club, run by Buddy Tanner. I will include a link to my Patreon page in the description of this video. Thank you all for your support.